The rain had been following me all night. It wasn't just falling, it was chasing me, tapping against the windshield like an impatient messenger trying to deliver a truth I didn't want to hear. Savannah at night looked different in the rain. The streets that usually glowed soft and warm under the lamps now shimmered in cold reflections, stretching and distorting until everything felt like a dream. Or a nightmare. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as Ethan's taillights cut through the darkness ahead. A steady pulse of red in the distance, the only color in a world washed gray. Every turn he made, I made. Every stoplight he rolled through, I rolled through seconds later. My heartbeat synced with the rhythm of the wipers, that relentless, mechanical thud, 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 marking time between who I was an hour ago and who I would be after tonight. He said he had a business dinner. That's what he told me when he left the house wearing the cologne he reserves for big meetings, the one that used to mean something special. He kissed me on the cheek, grabbed his keys, and smiled like a man who'd earned trust he didn't deserve. But something in his tone had been off. Too careful. Too calm. The kind of calm you rehearse when you know you're lying. I'd told myself I was being paranoid. But when I saw the message pop up on his locked screen, same time as last week, the paranoia turned into clarity. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions. I just waited until he left and followed. Now here I was, driving through the rain, my wedding ring cold against the steering wheel. The city began to thin. The brick buildings faded into quiet suburban homes with perfect lawns and trimmed hedges. The kind of neighborhood where everyone smiled during the day and hid their secrets behind curtains at night. His car slowed at a stop sign, and for a second, I thought he might have noticed me. But then, he turned left. My stomach tightened. I knew that street. I flicked off my headlights and followed in the dark. The houses were familiar. White porches, wind chimes, and hydrangeas that always bloom too early in the season. The road curved gently uphill, and at the end of it stood a pale blue house with a wraparound porch. The rain had softened the edges of everything, but even through the blur, I recognized it instantly. Lauren's house. My best friend. A flash of disbelief tore through me. My brain rejected the image before my eyes even finished processing it. Ethan's car rolled to a stop in front of her driveway. I froze. For a long second, I couldn't even breathe. The rain sounded louder, the wipers slower. I felt my pulse in my throat, hot and suffocating. He sat in the car for a few moments checking his phone. Then he stepped out, pulling his coat tighter around him, and jogged toward the porch. The motion sensor light clicked on. The door opened before he even knocked. Lauren stood there, wearing the same robe I'd seen 100 times during lazy Sunday mornings over coffee. Her hair was loose, her smile too wide. The kind of smile you reserve for someone who isn't supposed to be yours. She reached out and touched his arm, guiding him inside. The door closed behind them. My hands started to shake. I wanted to tell myself there was an explanation, that maybe he was there for something innocent, that maybe Lauren needed help with something, that maybe I was wrong. But even as I thought it, I knew I wasn't. No one opens the door like that for a business dinner. A sound escaped me. Half laugh, half sob. The kind of noise that feels like it comes from a stranger's throat. I lowered my head, resting my forehead against the steering wheel. The car smelled faintly of coffee and damp fabric. My reflection in the side mirror looked alien. Pale, wide-eyed, trembling. How could you? I whispered to no one. How could both of you? The clock on the dashboard blinked 9:47 p.m. He'd told me the dinner would end by 10. Always neat, always predictable. I used to love that about him. Now it just made the lies easier to schedule. I reached for my phone with numb fingers and opened the camera app. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my palms. The porch light was still on, illuminating the driveway in soft gold. His car gleamed under it like a trophy. I lifted the phone, aimed it toward the house, and zoomed in on the front door. My finger hovered over the button. Just proof, I whispered. I just need proof. Rain trickled down the window in tiny rivers, distorting the view. like the universe itself was trying to protect me from seeing too clearly. I took the shot. But in my panic, my finger brushed the wrong part of the screen. The flash went off. For a split second, everything turned white. The light bounced off the glass, off the rain, off the silver letters of the mailbox. And then it was gone. My breath caught. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, movement. The front door opened. A figure stepped out into the porch light. Ethan. His head turned toward the street, eyes scanning the dark. My stomach dropped. I slouched lower in the seat, heart slamming against my ribs. The rain wasn't loud enough to cover the sound of his footsteps on the wet pavement. He moved closer to the driveway, peering into the shadows. My mind raced. If he saw me now, there'd be no going back. No plan, no control. Just confrontation, chaos, exposure. He stopped by the curb, phone in hand. The glow of the screen lit up his face. The face of a man who still believed he was winning. I could see it now. The smug calm, the quiet confidence of someone who thinks their secret is untouchable. But behind that confidence, I saw something else. A flicker. A shadow of unease. He'd seen the flash. He knew someone was out here. I slid my phone into my lap, hand trembling, and ducked lower. The wipers squeaked once, painfully loud in the silence. Then, from the porch, another figure appeared. Lauren. She stepped into the light, her robe tied loosely, her hair damp. Her expression wasn't fear. It was curiosity, like she was trying to see what he was seeing. Her gaze followed his, straight toward my car. My pulse stopped. The streetlight above flickered once, throwing a streak of silver across my windshield. I knew, even from this distance, the moment she saw me. Her face changed. Her eyes widened, her mouth parted. She said something to him. He turned back toward the car. And then, slowly, he started walking toward me. If you'd asked me a month ago what happiness looked like, I would have pointed at my own life. A house on the edge of Forsyth Park, sunlight spilling through tall windows, a husband whose smile I thought I could trust. The kind of life that photographs well. Clean, framed, symmetrical. I built beauty for a living, so I believed I had built it for myself too. Ethan and I met 9 years ago in one of his listings. He was the real estate shark. I was the designer who made old homes breathe again. He said I made rooms feel like memory. I thought he made promises feel solid. For years, we were a good headline. Savannah's golden couple turns restoration into art. I handled color, texture, light. He handled contracts, numbers, charm. Lauren Pierce came later. First a client, then a friend, then almost family. She was effortless in that southern coastal way. Tan in February. Laughter that made waiters linger. She ran a lifestyle blog called Pierce the Day, all brunch photos and candlelight. I helped her style her shoots. She helped me forget to take things so seriously. When Ethan and I renovated her bungalow, the three of us became inseparable. Sunday brunches, wine nights, shared vacations to Tybee Island. If life were a painting, that's how I'd describe the first strokes. Warm, soft even. Morning rituals. Every weekday started the same. Ethan left at 7:30, coffee in a travel mug, phone already buzzing with agents and investors. I'd watch him from the porch, barefoot, mug in hand, the smell of gardenia drifting over the fence. He'd wave, that easy smile, and I'd feel lucky. I'd lock up, put on jazz, and dive into sketches for my next renovation. I lived in color palettes. He lived in spreadsheets. Somehow it worked, but lately his world had begun to expand without me in it. It started subtly, the dinners I wasn't invited to, the weekends lost to meetings. He said business was growing, success needed sacrifice. I told myself I was being supportive. Lauren, of course, knew everything, or I thought she did. When I mentioned his absences, she'd tilt her head, pour another glass, and say, "Men like Ethan get restless, Clara. Don't smother him." She made it sound sophisticated, like detachment was a virtue. I laughed. but something small and sharp twisted inside me. The first red flag one afternoon I dropped by Ethan's office with lunch. A small gesture, nothing dramatic. His assistant blinked when she saw me. "He's at a client meeting," she said. I glanced at the calendar on her desk. Empty slot. That night, I asked where he'd been. He smiled, said the client canceled last minute and he'd gone to the gym instead. The answer came too easily, like a line rehearsed. Later, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. The Savannah Grill. 2 entrees, 2 wines, 8:36 p.m. We'd eaten there for our anniversary last year. I remember standing there with the receipt pressed between my fingers, heat rushing to my face. I almost marched into his study to demand answers. Instead, I slid the paper into the back of a drawer. I told myself one dinner meant nothing. Love requires faith. But faith, I'd learn, is just what you gamble when you're afraid of the truth. Lauren's world around the same time, Lauren's blog started booming. She'd hired a photographer, talked about brand deals, sponsorships, travel. We met for coffee downtown more than ever, at least once a week. She'd show me mock-ups of her new logo, ask for advice, ask about Ethan, always about Ethan. "Still buried in work?" She'd laugh. "Always," I'd answer. She'd smile like she already knew. She had a way of making me feel both adored and analyzed, like she was taking notes I couldn't read. Sometimes Ethan would mention her name casually. "Lauren says the market's softening," or "Lauren told me about that new gallery." The first few times I was glad they got along. The last few, I noticed how naturally her name fit into his sentences. Too comfortably, like a song he'd been humming all day. Still, I didn't say anything. You don't accuse your best friend of being too friendly. You just take a deeper breath and change the subject. Cracks in the frame. The distance between Ethan and me grew in centimeters, barely visible but cumulative. He'd stay up later, scrolling. He'd step outside to take calls. When I entered the room, he'd flip his phone face down. I started keeping mental notes instead of journals. Wednesday, new cologne. Thursday, gray shirt she once complimented. Friday, laughter from the study, then silence when I entered. He used to kiss my temple every night before turning off the lamp. Then one evening, he didn't. And the next, he forgot again. You tell yourself these things happen in long marriages. That routine dulls affection. But I'd seen enough design to know cracks don't appear without pressure behind them. The party. The last time all 3 of us were together before that night in the car was at Lauren's housewarming party. Ethan and I arrived late. The place glowed like a Pinterest board. Candlelight, champagne, her favorite indie playlist. She looked radiant. When she hugged Ethan, her hands lingered on his back just a second too long. I saw it. He saw me see it. He laughed and said, "Don't be jealous. She's practically family." I smiled because that's what wives do in public. Halfway through the night, I caught them whispering near the kitchen island. Nothing intimate, just close. Heads tilted, voices low. The kind of closeness that makes air heavy. Later, as we were leaving, Lauren pressed a box into my hands. "For you," she said. Inside was a scented candle labeled Trust. I remember thinking it was an odd joke. She laughed when I pointed it out. "It's just a name, Clara. Don't overthink." But I did. All the way home, that word burned in my lap like a warning. Ethan's apology. A week later, he apologized. Not for anything specific, just in general, as if his conscience needed to stretch its legs. He said he'd been distant, promised we'd take a trip soon. His voice was soft, eyes steady, convincing. I wanted to believe him. People don't survive marriage without choosing belief over suspicion once in a while. So I nodded, kissed him back, and pretended the weight in my chest was lifting. That night, he fell asleep quickly. I lay awake watching the rain trace lines on the window, the same way it would on the windshield the night everything shattered. The phone. The moment that truly changed everything was small, almost boring. Ethan had left his phone on the counter while he showered. It buzzed once, then again. A message preview flashed. Same time as last week? No name, just a heart emoji. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. My heart recognized what my mind refused to read. When he came out, towel around his waist, he glanced at the counter, saw the notification, and for the first time since I'd known him, he hesitated. That single heartbeat of panic told me everything. He noticed my stare and smiled too quickly. Work stuff, he said. Of course, I answered. The words tasted metallic. From that second on, my world divided into before and after. Foreshadow. In the following days, he became sweeter. Flowers appeared, dinners planned, attention renewed. Guilt makes people generous. And Lauren? She grew quieter, more guarded. Her messages shortened. Busy lately became her new catchphrase. It was like watching two actors forget their lines halfway through a play, each covering for the other, hoping the audience didn't notice. But I was no longer in the audience. I was backstage, seeing the wires, the fake backdrops, the painted smiles, the red flag moment. The night before everything unraveled, Ethan canceled our anniversary dinner. Said a new investor flew in unexpectedly. I'd already booked a table overlooking the river. He promised we'd celebrate tomorrow instead. Minutes later, Lauren texted that she couldn't meet for our weekly coffee because she was helping her aunt move. Her aunt had died 3 years ago. That was it. The final brushstroke revealing the whole picture. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply stared at the message until the words blurred, then set my phone down and began to plan. Because when love collapses, silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. That was the last peaceful night of my old life. By the next evening, I was behind the wheel, following Ethan's car through the rain, my pulse matching the wiper's beat, driving straight toward the house where friendship and marriage would both die under the same porch light. I sat in the car long after they disappeared inside, rain hammering against the roof, thunder rolling like distant applause for the cruelest show on earth. My fingers were numb, my throat raw from holding in every sound I wanted to make. I'd seen enough, or maybe not enough. There was a sickness in the not knowing, a kind of torture that made me want to see more, even if it killed whatever was left of me. So I waited. The house glowed warm behind fogged windows, a golden secret in the storm. Every few minutes I saw their silhouettes move across the curtains, a shadow leaning close, a flash of an arm, the kind of gestures that need no translation. The ache behind my ribs turned solid, like my heart was turning into something sharp and cold. When I finally drove away, my reflection in the rearview mirror didn't look like me anymore. I don't remember the drive home, only the silence that followed me in. The clock read 11:38. His side of the bed was untouched. I sat on the floor and stared at the door until dawn. At some point, I laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds like glass breaking. Then I cried until there was nothing left but the decision to survive. The next morning, Ethan came home smelling like rain and lies. His hair was damp, his expression perfectly composed, as if nothing had happened. Dinner went late, he said, dropping his jacket on the chair. Investors from Atlanta. He kissed the top of my head. Casual, familiar, practiced. My stomach twisted, but I smiled. I smiled because now I understood what kind of war I was in, and I wasn't ready to show my weapons. He showered, whistled, made coffee. I memorized everything. His tone, his pace, his hands steady as he poured cream into his mug. I wondered if he'd kissed her goodnight before walking through our door. I wondered if he even noticed how easily the lie slipped past his teeth. When he left for the office, I sat in his study. His phone buzzed once on the desk, a notification preview I caught just before it vanished. Her name, Lauren Pierce, a small heart next to it. Something in me went still. Not anger, not grief, something colder. I opened his laptop, the one he always locked but never changed the password on because he thought I was too gentle to invade privacy. Within minutes, I was inside his email. My hands shook as I typed her name into the search bar. There it was, thread after thread, weeks of messages, some hidden under work-related subject lines. So proud of you tonight. Can't stop thinking about you. Wish you were here instead of her. My stomach turned, but I kept reading, kept scrolling, each word like a cut I refused to stop receiving. Screenshots of flights, hotel confirmations, inside jokes that made me sick. He'd written once, "She still has no clue." It's almost too easy. I sat there until my tears dried into salt on my skin. Then I copied everything, every message, every image, every receipt, onto a flash drive. Proof. Not just for me, but for whatever came next. When I closed the laptop, the reflection on the black screen showed a woman I didn't recognize, hollow-eyed, lips pressed thin, calm in the way only broken people can be calm. That evening, I called Lauren. My voice didn't shake. "Hey," I said. "Want to grab coffee tomorrow?" She hesitated, then agreed. I could hear Ethan in the background, faintly, a laugh I knew too well. She must have turned away from him because her tone shifted, softer. "Of course, babe. Usual place?" The next morning, she arrived in her usual perfection. White sundress, effortless hair, smile rehearsed for the camera. She hugged me, ordered her latte with oat milk, and asked about my new design project as if nothing had changed. I watched her talk, gesturing with manicured hands, and wondered how she could be so composed when she'd spent the night in my husband's arms. At one point, her phone buzzed on the table. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me. A microsecond of panic crossed her face before she caught herself. "Sorry," she said. "Client thing." I smiled and stirred my coffee. "Ethan mentioned you've been helping with some of his listings," I said lightly. Her posture tightened. "Just a little advice. You know me, can't resist giving my opinion." "Of course," I said. "You've always been good at slipping into other people's projects." She froze mid-sip. The words landed exactly where I aimed them. I watched her swallow, recover, laugh too loudly. "God, Clara, you sound jealous." "I guess I am," I said quietly. "You've always had a way of getting what you want." She didn't answer. We both knew the conversation had ended, but neither of us stood up. The silence between us was thick, heavy with the truth neither dared to name. When she finally left, I sat alone at the table, her perfume still floating in the air, the same one I'd smelled on his jacket. That night, I couldn't bring myself to touch him. He climbed into bed beside me, scrolling his phone, then turned off the light and mumbled, "Love you." The words felt foreign now, like a language I'd forgotten. I whispered it back, but it tasted like ashes. The days that followed blurred together. Pretending became my new profession. I laughed at his jokes, met Lauren for brunch, posted photos that screamed normalcy. Behind it all, I was documenting everything. The lies, the patterns, the timings. Each note, each file, each conversation was another piece of a puzzle that spelled the word betrayal. One evening, Ethan left his briefcase in the car. I retrieved it, planning to put it in his office, but curiosity pulled me deeper. Inside, among contracts and property documents, was a printed itinerary for a trip to Charleston. 2 tickets, 1 hotel room. Dates circled. Next weekend. I recognized the handwriting next to the reservation. Lauren's. A heart drawn beside his name. That was the moment the truth stopped being abstract. It was physical now, printed on paper, tangible enough to burn. I sat at my desk and stared at it, the rain outside echoing the night it all began. My body trembled, not from sadness, but from a new clarity. I wasn't crying anymore. I was calculating. When Ethan came home, I greeted him with a kiss and dinner. We talked about mundane things, groceries, neighbors, the weather. He smiled, oblivious. He had no idea that every word he spoke became ammunition. He said he'd have to leave town for a conference. I nodded. "Of course," I said. "You work too hard." He touched my hand, grateful for my understanding. I almost laughed at the irony. The next morning, I drove to Lauren's house. I parked down the street, hidden behind the same oak tree where I'd sat that first night. Through her window, I saw them again, packing suitcases, laughing. He poured her wine at 10 a.m., like they were newlyweds heading on vacation. My vision tunneled, but I forced myself to keep watching. When he stepped outside to take a call, she moved to the mirror, adjusting her hair, humming. She looked radiant, happy, like she'd won, and maybe she had. For now. But as I sat there in the car, watching them move inside that house built with my design advice, filled with furniture I'd helped her choose, I realized something that froze me to the core. Every part of their affair lived in a world I had built for them. My work, my choices, my trust. They'd used it all as scaffolding for their lies. I had unknowingly designed their sanctuary. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was architectural. The nausea passed, replaced by something pure and deliberate. Revenge didn't come to me as an explosion. It arrived like a blueprint. Precise, measured, almost beautiful in its symmetry. That evening, Ethan returned home early, humming, still carrying her scent. He kissed my cheek, said, "Conference went great." I smiled back and said, "I'm glad." Then I went into my studio, closed the door, and stared at the wall until the outlines of my next creation formed, not of paint or fabric, but of retribution. Because love, when betrayed, doesn't die. It mutates. It becomes something sharp enough to cut with. And that was the night I stopped being the woman he married. That was the night I became the woman he would never forget. ChatGPT said, by the time Ethan's next business trip came around, I wasn't the same woman who used to wait by the window. Something in me had hardened, like clay fired too long in the kiln. I could smile now, easily, convincingly, but the warmth behind it was gone. I moved through the days as if I were playing myself in a play I no longer cared about, saying my lines just to keep the scene going until the curtain fell. He packed his suitcase in our bedroom while I folded laundry on the bed, careful to match his rhythm. "Don't wait up," he said, slipping cufflinks into his case. "The meeting might run late." I nodded, not looking at him, because I didn't trust my face to stay neutral. The lies were louder now. They filled the air like static, pressing against my eardrums. That night, when he kissed my forehead goodbye, I didn't flinch. I waited until the sound of his car faded down the street, then walked into his office and turned on his computer. His password hadn't changed. Neither had my patience. The inbox was full of invoices and contracts. Beneath them, hidden under a folder named Tax Documents, was a subfolder called Personal. Inside were photos, hotel rooms, dinners, trips. Lauren's hand on his shoulder, her reflection caught in mirrors behind him. He'd kept souvenirs of his betrayal, a collector of his own sins. I stared at one image too long. The two of them in front of a mirror, her holding his phone, both smiling. The picture had been taken in our guest bathroom. I didn't cry. I simply stared until my eyes stung and then whispered to the empty room, "You wanted to play games, fine. I'll learn the rules." The decision wasn't born out of rage. Rage is noisy. What I felt was quiet, focused. A calm that settles over you when there's nothing left to lose. I realized I didn't want him to simply confess or apologize. I wanted him to feel the humiliation of being unmasked. I wanted her to lose the shiny, polished version of herself she fed to her followers. The revenge had to be precise, like my designs, balanced, measured, impossible to undo. I started with information. I cloned his phone using an app a client once bragged about during a remodel project, something meant for parents tracking teenagers. I justified it as research at the time. Now, it was justice. Within hours, every message he sent appeared on my screen. I watched their conversations unfold in real time. "Next week? Can't wait to get away from her. You always know how to make me feel alive." Each word was fuel. I didn't interrupt. I just collected. Every lie he wrote was another nail, another beam in the structure I was building. A few days later, Lauren posted a photo on her blog, a new brand collaboration, sponsored jewelry glittering on her neck. The caption read, "When you know your worth, the universe rewards you." I stared at the screen until I laughed out loud. That necklace was his anniversary gift to me 2 years ago. It wasn't enough to expose them. Exposure ends too quickly. What I wanted was erosion, the slow, irreversible collapse of everything they'd built. So I began rehearsing empathy. I texted Lauren more often, invited her for lunch, listened to her talk about her stress. She complained about brand deadlines and the constant pressure to stay perfect. I nodded, took mental notes, asked harmless questions about her sponsors, her contracts, her accountant. She mistook my calm for fragility. It's easy to underestimate someone who looks like they're breaking. With Ethan, I leaned into routine. I made his favorite meals, ironed his shirts, touched his shoulder when he passed. I became the mirror he wanted to see. Loving, loyal, oblivious. Every act of kindness made him softer, more careless. When he left his tablet unlocked one morning, I found copies of financial reports he shouldn't have had. His company was facing an audit. He'd been moving assets between shell accounts, some under my name. My mouth went dry. He was planning his escape, but he wanted to take my credit down with him. That's when the decision stopped being emotional. It became mathematical. I called an old college friend, Ryan, who worked in IT security. I told him I suspected Ethan of embezzlement and needed help recovering deleted files. Ryan owed me a favor. By nightfall, I had every transaction, every hidden folder, every trace of the trail Ethan thought he'd erased. Looking at the evidence, I realized how perfectly his lies fit together, like a house of cards built from stolen air. If I pulled one, the whole thing would collapse. The temptation to do it immediately was strong, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. A storm, to be satisfying, must arrive at the right moment. I waited until Ethan returned from his trip, tan and smug, humming the same tune he always did after her. Over dinner, he told me how exhausting work had been, how much he missed me. I reached across the table, touched his hand, and said softly, "You deserve a break." His eyes warmed. "You're amazing," he said. I smiled, hiding the truth that in that exact moment I was erasing his future one document at a time. That night, I lay beside him, listening to his even breathing. My phone buzzed under the pillow, an alert from the tracking app. "Lauren, good night, love. Same time tomorrow?" I stared at the words glowing in the dark. I felt nothing. No anger, no grief, just a steady certainty. Tomorrow, everything would begin. I slipped out of bed, walked barefoot to the window, and looked out at the city. The rain had stopped, but the streets still shimmered under the lamplight, slick and silent. I pressed my palm against the cold glass and whispered, "You'll never see me coming." By morning, my plan was clear. I'd expose them not with screams, but with precision. Their careers, their reputations, their comfort, all built on deceit, would crumble under the same spotlight they'd use to blind me. They'd lose what they valued most: image and control. When Ethan left for work, I stood in the doorway watching him go, the same scene I'd watched 1,000 times. But this time, I didn't wave. I memorized his license plate instead. The house felt too quiet after he was gone. I walked through it slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, the life I'd built. Every object felt like evidence. My own reflection in the hallway mirror stared back, calm, unreadable, a stranger I trusted more than the woman I'd been. That afternoon, I drove to the waterfront, parked, and sat in silence. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed love could be designed like a perfect room, symmetrical, stable, safe. She was gone now, buried beneath blueprints of vengeance. I took out my phone, opened a new note, and titled it, Phase 1. There were no tears left, no tremor in my hands, only purpose. By the time the sun set, I'd already drafted the outline of their destruction. It would start quietly, one leak here, one whisper there. Enough to make them doubt each other. Enough to make the cracks visible. As darkness settled over Savannah, I looked at the reflection of the water and saw my face flicker under the streetlight, half in shadow, half illuminated. The decision was made. The woman Ethan thought he controlled was gone. What stood in her place was patient, calculating, and absolutely certain. I didn't need to confront them. I would let the truth do it for me, and when it finally did, it would be loud enough to drown them both. I tried the obvious first, storming in, making a scene, the kind of cinematic confrontation that promises instant satisfaction. It felt right for a few furious minutes. I pictured their faces collapsing under the weight of truth. Then I thought about the way people scramble when the light hits them. Lawyers called, statements rehearsed, sympathy manufactured. I wanted ruin, not theater. So I put that idea in the drawer and started again. I sketched the plan the way I sketch rooms: light, blind spots, escape routes. Phase 1, Phase 2, contingencies. The first false start taught me humility. I sent an anonymous tip to a gossip blogger and waited for the chaos it would create. The reply was a cold, clinical refusal. No verifiable source, no publication. Scandal without proof is a damp match. That failure redirected me. I needed credibility, not noise. Ryan answered the next call. He owed me favors from college and had the patience of a man who loved puzzles. Under the pretense of recovering lost client files, he pulled deleted emails and calendar entries from Ethan's backups. He found hotel bookings hidden under bland titles, time-stamped messages, 2-for-1 receipts tucked into folders labeled work. When he said, "He's sloppy," he wasn't mocking, he was delighted. Sloppy meant traceable. I handed him a burner drive and a list of what to export. That partnership felt like turning a corner. Maya came soon after. PR experience folded into a quieter life advising brands when crises whispered. She listened without the shock I expected, and then, like a surgeon, asked where the strain would hurt them most. Image, she said. Their livelihoods hinge on who they appear to be. Hit that and everything else will follow. She sketched a damage timeline on a napkin, circling sponsors, agents, investors, the local board. I liked how practical she was. Rage is an engine, but strategy is a map. I built leverage quietly. For Ethan, I arranged documents that showed irregular transfers, redactions I could reveal to a financial investigator. For Lauren, I created a pattern. An invoice here, a misattributed sponsorship there. Small things that, when professionally reviewed, looked negligent at best and fraudulent at worst. Each planted piece had to be discoverable but plausible. I didn't want lurid photos. I wanted audits. I wanted contracts rescinded and legal teams circling like vultures. There were nights I panicked. Once Lauren changed her routine, posting more polished content, attending more events. I imagined she'd sensed me. I nearly sent Ryan to force an early drop, but Maya reminded me that desperation looks like vindictiveness. We paused and watched instead. Her doubling down only made her more exposed. More appearances, more sponsors making representations that could later be questioned. My restraint became an asset. I tested channels for leaks. Anonymous emails went nowhere. Burner accounts were ignored. The aha came when Nina, a journalist I'd once helped with an exhibit, answered my call. She read the files, not the gossip. "This isn't salacious," she said. "This is a pattern of behavior with business implications." I redacted sensitive personal details and handed over bank statements and message metadata. Her questions were clinical. The way she framed them would matter. A reputable reporter asking for comment is a different animal than a tabloid's rumor. That credibility was the key that unlocked sponsors and boards' attention. I built decoys, an invoice suggesting a fabricated payout that, when audited, would require an explanation, a contractor's note implying unauthorized transfers, a mocked-up contract clause that raised red flags for legal teams. They were small and traceable, designed for discovery by professionals. I wanted auditors and PR teams to find them, not trolls. Professionals act differently. They initiate freezes, demand explanations, and when they smell risk, they withdraw support quickly. While I stitched the net, their life continued in blissful normalcy. Ethan gave a speech at a local summit, smiling for photos, handshakes abundant. Lauren filmed a campaign on brand authenticity, laughing into the camera about transparency. Their public faces were immaculate. Their private inboxes contradicted every word. Watching them was perverse, like seeing a perfectly dressed mannequin hiding a rotten core. I cataloged their performances, noting sponsors' names, investors' emails, hashtags used in posts. These details became levers. Not everything went smoothly. Ryan almost got flagged while extracting a backup, and for a breathless hour I imagined detection. He recovered with a plausible software update explanation, and the window remained open. Another time, a sponsor called Lauren with a routine question about engagement metrics. She deflected with practiced charm. Each near miss taught me patience. Speed would ruin the architecture I was building. I learned to wait for openings and to hold my tongue when instinct screamed for action. I also rehearsed narratives. Maya helped draft neutral statements. "We are reviewing internal concerns," instead of "we were betrayed." Phrasing mattered. A legal-sounding disclosure triggers investigations. An emotional outburst feeds sympathy. The aim was to trigger institutional responses, suspensions, audits, contract holds, so the collapse looked like due process, not personal vengeance. That way, the consequences would be clean and irreversible. When the pieces felt aligned, I synchronized the drops. Ryan prepared a secure file transfer for a vetted financial investigator. Nina prepared questions that would appear in print with incontrovertible dates and redacted documents attached. Maya reached out to sponsor contacts under the guise of compliance officers. The plan was not a single blast, but a coordinated set of gentle detonations, a series of knocks that would become a hurricane. On the night before the first release, I sat at my drafting table surrounded by blueprints and timelines, the same calm settling over me that I feel before I start a remodel. False starts, failed ideas, and cold corrections had refined the approach until it matched the rigor of my designs. Outside, their lives glowed with the false comfort of routine. Inside, I had mapped every exit and every hidden seam. I felt no elation, only a quiet, focused anticipation. When the first domino fell, it would not be messy. It would be inevitable. The first blow came softly. Nina's article dropped at 8 a.m., headlined with quiet authority. Audit initiated into local developers' financial practices. No tabloid sting, just numbers, dates, and the kind of detail that makes investors skip breakfast. Within an hour, messages pinged through Ethan's company. Words like review, compliance, and temporary hold replaced the usual congratulations. I watched him from the kitchen window, pacing the driveway, phone clamped to his ear, voice rising each call. Lauren reacted faster. She posted a photo of herself smiling by the river. Caption: "Storms make trees take deeper roots." I almost laughed. Sponsors didn't. 2 paused contracts within 24 hours. Pending clarification. The next day, her management team issued a statement about misinformation. I could almost hear the tremor under the polish. Behind the scenes, Ryan's data transfer landed in the hands of the forensic accountant we'd primed. The report he sent to the board was clinical. Discrepancies, duplicate vendor payments, shell accounts. Ethan's irregularities now had weight. The board scheduled an emergency audit, freezing accounts until further notice. He came home that night gray and tight-lipped, muttering about temporary nonsense. I served dinner in silence, watching the empire he'd built start to tilt. Phase 2 rolled on schedule. Maya contacted 2 of Lauren's sponsors for verification. Her phrasing was perfect. Professional concern, not accusation. Within hours, emails bounced to legal teams. Corporate risk departments are predators. They sense blood long before the wound shows. By Thursday, 3 more partnerships were under evaluation. That evening, I attended Ethan's gala. His victory lap, the The night he'd bragged would solidify everything. I dressed in black and sat at the back. When the montage of his career highlights began, the projector flickered to an image no one expected: a payment ledger, transfers highlighted, dates aligned with his supposed charity expenses. The room went still. Then whispers rippled like static. His expression froze halfway between a smile and a grimace. The presenter stumbled over the next line. The audience stared, and somewhere a phone camera clicked. It lasted 20 seconds, long enough. When the lights returned, the damage was irreversible. He stumbled through the rest of his speech while half the audience typed notes. I left before applause, or what passed for it, started. By Friday, Nina's piece had been syndicated. The real estate board confirmed an investigation. Investors suspended funding. Just temporary, Ethan told reporters, but his hands shook when he locked the door that night. Lauren's unraveling was slower, more exquisite. Brands issued polite, identical statements about values and transparency. Her followers noticed the silence between posts. Engagement plunged, the comments turned predatory. She posted a video, tear-softened and unconvincing, about truth and redemption. It only made the sponsors move faster. One terminated her contract midstream, citing a breach of ethics clause. Meanwhile, the audit clause Ryan had unearthed, buried in an old contract, activated automatically once irregular transfers reached a threshold. It granted the company temporary receivership to protect creditors. Ethan hadn't read it when he signed years ago. Now it handed control to an external auditor who happened to be my recommendation. Overnight, his access to corporate accounts vanished. He shouted, slammed doors, demanded explanations that no one owed him anymore. I listened from the next room as he called partners, his voice shrinking with every unanswered ring. "We can fix this," he kept saying. But the fix had already been removed. On social media, the two of them tried one last defense. Lauren posted a quote about forgiveness. Ethan posted a photo of a sunset captioned, "Starting over." The comments were brutal. The internet has no mercy for sincerity once the receipts are public. Saturday morning brought the final blow. The local paper printed the headline, "Developer suspended amid ongoing audit. Associated influencer under review." It wasn't vengeance. It was documentation. Every detail I'd built fed into procedure, not scandal. The system itself became my weapon, clean and irrefutable. I walked to the balcony with coffee and watched the light shift across the street. Cars passed, ordinary and unaware. Somewhere across town, Ethan was meeting lawyers who would tell him to stop talking. Lauren was probably drafting apologies to sponsors who'd already moved on. The silence that followed felt wide and weightless. Late that evening, a courier delivered a sealed envelope. Inside was a temporary order naming me as interim custodian of several of Ethan's business assets, pending the outcome of the audit. Legal jargon, stamped and final. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal and let out a breath that felt years old. The paper didn't thrill me. It steadied me. The architecture was complete. Ethan returned home past midnight, shoulders collapsed, eyes rimmed red. "They're saying it's fraud," he whispered, as if the word might disappear if spoken softly. "You know me, Clara. You know I'd never—" I met his gaze for the first time in days. "Yes," I said. "I know exactly who you are." He didn't answer. He sank into the chair and stared at nothing, finally understanding that the collapse wasn't sudden. It had been engineered layer by layer, right under his nose. The next morning, Lauren called. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, voice shaking, still clinging to the hope of some shared explanation. I deleted it. There was nothing left to explain. News spread quickly. Ethan stepped down to focus on personal matters. Lauren took a break from social media. Both of them disappeared from the circles that had once worshipped them. Their silence was the proof of success I never needed to announce. For weeks, I didn't celebrate. I reorganized the studio, cleared out sketches, stripped the house of everything that smelled like them. Each removal felt like air returning after years of compression. Revenge wasn't loud. It was the quiet satisfaction of control restored. Sometimes at night, I'd imagine them scrolling through headlines, reliving the same cold shock I'd felt that first night in the rain. Maybe they blamed each other. Maybe they still didn't understand how carefully it had all been built. It didn't matter. The structure stood, and they were buried under it. When the court finalized the receivership and released my portion of the settlement, I didn't smile. I just looked at the signature and thought, symmetry. The betrayal had been personal. The consequence was professional. Balance restored. I poured a glass of wine, stepped onto the balcony, and let the city's noise fade beneath me. Somewhere, Ethan and Lauren were learning the same lesson I had learned too late. When you build your life on lies, it only takes one precise strike for everything to collapse. And I had made that strike with a designer's hand. The silence after victory was stranger than I expected. There were no headlines left to read, no more calls from lawyers or journalists. The noise of their downfall faded until it became background static, like a distant storm that had already passed. For the first time in months, I woke without checking my phone. I made coffee, opened the window, and listened to Savannah breathe. Ethan moved out quietly. No scene, no apology, just a box of suits and a single line. "I never thought you'd do this." I almost laughed. He still believed what happened to him was an accident of fate, not the result of meticulous design. Lauren vanished from the internet entirely. Her accounts went dark, her sponsors erased her posts. Someone told me she'd left town. I didn't care where she went. Exile has a way of finding its own coordinates. I sold the house a month later. It wasn't grief that drove me, it was the air. It still carried echoes of them, perfume, cologne, laughter behind closed doors. I packed light, my sketchbooks, a few photos that still meant something, the wine glasses I'd bought for anniversaries that never deserved to be celebrated. The rest I left behind. Let the walls keep their ghosts. The money from the receivership sat untouched in my account. I didn't need it. Its existence was enough. Proof that I'd survived the fire and walked out carrying the matchbook. I rented a small apartment overlooking the water and filled it with plants and silence. People asked if I was lonely. I told them solitude isn't loneliness. It's freedom without witnesses. One evening, months after the dust had settled, an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, the same one I'd taken that night in the rain, Ethan's car in Lauren's driveway. But this version was printed from a different angle, sharper, closer. Someone else had been there. Behind the photo was a note written in clean block letters. "You weren't the only one watching." I read it twice, then a third time. For a moment, I felt that old rush of adrenaline, the pulse that comes before discovery. But then I smiled. Whoever it was, they were late. The game was already over. I slipped the photo into a drawer and poured myself another glass of wine. Justice, I realized, doesn't need witnesses either. It just needs precision. As the sun sank over the water, the glass caught the last of the light, turning everything gold. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the quiet take over. Somewhere out there, new secrets were being born, new betrayals blooming behind polite smiles. But they weren't mine. I had built my revenge like a cathedral, measured, silent, and complete. And now, at last, I could walk away from it.